For the purpose of this conversation, Nikhil, I want to understand from you the purpose behind the things that you do.
We make important things interesting to create impact. I have produced 4 of the first 10 web series ever made in India.
What can you tell us with your vantage point as to how media has evolved?
After Ranbir Kapoor and Sid, you will notice that there is no one character that has stood out for a decade. Rahul Raj was a decade-long character. Trit Kabir was a decade-long character. The last 10 years, we have not had any characters that have gone on for a decade.
What can you tell us about understanding distribution and how that has evolved over a period of time?
You know, I feel like there is a storytelling truth. It is that the more specific it is, the more universal it will be.
But that feels a bit counterintuitive.
It's not. And that's the whole point.
Yeah.
You can't start by saying, I'm going to create something for everybody.
Yeah.
That is never going to work.
Yeah.
Even the biggest of films today are flopping because they are trying to create something for everybody.
Tell us where the skill lies. If I can write today as well as you can.
But you can't. And I'm not saying you can write as well as me.
AI can.
No, it can't. And I'm telling you, anybody who genuinely feels that AI can replicate what a true artist does is not just ignorant, but stupid.
Hello. Before we get started with this episode, I quickly wanted to share that we are now a part of the Zerodha Media Network. Thank you so much for watching.
Welcome to the Indian Silicon Valley podcast. I'm your host Jivraj, and today I have with me a very special guest. Join me in welcoming Mr. Nikhil Taneja, who is the co-founder and chief of Yuvaa, a leading media organization that focuses on putting out conversations for the Gen Z about things which are very less spoken about, and it puts out conscious content that is not out there. It's a subject that is very close to my heart, but I haven't gotten a chance to talk to an expert from the field. So we're going to hear from the horse's mouth. He's also the host of this incredible podcast that I really look up to. It's called Be a Man Yaar. I'm sure all of you listening are already aware of it. It has some of the most prolific, vulnerable conversations in the country today. I'm really delighted to have Nikhil on the show. Finally, I've admired his work for long on social media and can't wait to start the conversation with him. Thank you so much, Nikhil, for joining me.
Thank you, Jivraj, for such a kind introduction. As you already know, I've also been a huge fan of your work.
That means a lot to me.
I've been following what you've been doing with this podcast, what you do with your time and equity. And it's really admirable that, at a young age, you've been so focused and as I said, I just love everything that you do.
Thank you so much. That means really a lot coming from you. And I meant everything that I said because it's been such a pleasure observing whatever you do selflessly. It just feels very authentic and it feels responsible. And it also makes you believe that you can do good work and be successful, right? As opposed to keep that as a mutually exclusive bucket. For the purpose of this conversation, Nikhil, I want to understand from you the purpose behind the things that you do. And then again, how do you, from a capitalistic point of view, look at the socialistic things that you are passionate about, right? Because I think a lot of people face this dilemma, right? There are things that they feel deeply about, yet do not see value in pursuing because society has conditioned us to believe that there is only one pathway to success. So I actually wanted to, break that objective and, theme down through our conversation. Where I want to start is, Yuvaa is this organization you say that you put out conscious content, you talk about things that are not out there, you are very focused towards the new generation, the younger people of the country. Talk to us about things within that landscape that excite you, and what are things that are not spoken about that should be, and maybe give us a precursor to all that Yuvaa does, and then we'll break down different facets of it.
Okay. There's a lot. Where do I start? Okay. I'm going to try and start by explaining to you why I even started Yuvaa, because I think that'll give a good context. So I used to work in Yash Raj Films. We're shooting right opposite my former alma mater in that sense. I was a head of content and development of the youth wing of Yash Raj Films called Y Films. And I was, by the time I had finished working there, I was GM of all things that were creative but non-film. So I used to work on talent, I used to work on business as well as creative and content, but non-film work. So I actually got that opportunity over there to hear, I think about, in the time that I spent, about 4.5 years, because I was the head of content development, I think about 3, 4, 500 scripts over a period of time. And one of the things that would always fascinate me was that every person who would come to pitch a script at Yashraj, they would have one or two things that they believed young people did. Because we were a youth organization, youth platform within Yashraj, every script about young people was either about love or about murder. That's it. That's what all script writers in the country would believe that young people did. That either they are falling in love with each other or they're killing each other. And if it was another genre, it was a combination of one of these genres. Okay. So it is love and murder, or it is, love and something else, love and road trip, love and drama, love and something else, or it is murder and something else. And I'm like, do you really feel like this is all young people are? And the reason I would have this question is because while I spent the first 10 years of my career in the entertainment industry, before Yashraj, I was at MTV. I started my career as a journalist at Hindustan Times. And of course, as a cliche, I am an engineer, who isn't, I would imagine. But the 10 years that I spent in the entertainment industry, in the mainstream media organizations, during the side, I was also a professor of journalism at Jai Hind College in Mumbai. I used to teach third year students. I used to teach news reporting because I started as a reporter. And every week, I would spend time for 7 years with my students in Jai Hind. And I would hear them out, right? I think that was one of the most radical things, Yuvraj, that I ended up doing. That instead of trying to talk to young people, I try to listen to them. Instead of trying just to teach them, I try to learn from them. And it's not something that came immediately to me, but I think after about a year of kind of being the person who was a big fan of Dead Poets Society and used to be like, I'm going to go and change these young people's life. I realized they're far smarter than me. And I think like if anything, they're going to change mine. So I humbled down by second year and I really started listening to them more. And every year I would hear so many fascinating things that they would say. Some really heartfelt, some sincere, genuine, thoughtful, nuanced, incredible worldviews. And then I would see that none of this is reflected in mainstream media, right? None of this is reflected in any of the work that we were doing. That it just seemed always to me that people who are working on young things, especially in the media ecosystem, sit in glass cabins in Lokhandwala Andheri. They have not even stepped out of those glass cabins, forget stepping out of the stepping off the city of Mumbai to actually find out what young people wanted. And because of that, there was a huge gap and a huge lack in terms of what do young people want, but what are they being shown as? When you think about it, the Amir Khan at 45 played young in Three Idiots, right? Salman Khan in Sultan played a college student. You have Shah Rukh Khan. All of these massive film actors have been playing college kids or early 20s for the longest time. It's only now in the last maybe 5 to 7 years where we've started seeing younger people coming in and reclaiming those roles as young people. So I kind of constantly saw that the communication of for and of young people was always one thing. It was always from the media organization towards young people, but it did not at all take into account their thoughts, their feelings, their dreams, their emotions, their aspirations. And I wanted to start a platform that actually listens to young people. And that's really where the germ of Yuvaa started. That can we actually create a platform that hears young people and then creates content that makes them feel more seen, more heard, and more represented. And in many ways, less lonely. Because that's one of the biggest insights that I would get from my teaching years, that a lot of young people are constantly feeling that, they don't exist for the rest of the world. We are one of the youngest countries in the world, and yet, and again, now things are changing a lot because of content and the content ecosystem. But even then, when you look at it, young people are typically condescended to. They're always looked down upon. They're not really taken very seriously. We don't, as one of the youngest countries, what is our representation of young people in parliament, in actual places of policy making or decision making? A lot needs to change. Yuvaa was one of the first steps that I thought that we could take in trying to create a company an organization and hopefully an ecosystem where young voices are heard and reflected back to them, especially on things that they care deeply about and things that matter. So I'm going to end in this phrase just for the rest of the conversation to go smoothly, I suppose. What we try to work with when I say that we hear young people, what do we really do after hearing them? We make important things interesting to create impact in the lives of young people. When I say important things, it means urgent issues that young people care deeply about.
Sure.
And how do you find that out? When you listen to them, they tell you. Then you know that this is important. Now, how do you make these issues in an accessible way, in a way that they understand, and that is how impact is created. And as a corollary, and this is something that I feel is extremely important, if you don't make important things interesting, unfortunately, the interesting things end up being important. And that's the world we live in. And that's a scary proposition, where the things that are on the top of the mind of everybody in the world right now are just extremely interesting, fun things that you're constantly scrolling about, but they're not important enough. And hence, as a society, I feel like we're regressing a little bit because we don't give enough importance to important things, and we don't find a way of making those important things accessible enough. And that's where Yuvaa comes in.
That's so well articulated because, in fact, let me put my question out there. As you were explaining to me, the thought that was coming to my head is, unfortunate as it is, and I'm stereotyping here, it just feels like a lot of content is built to appeal to the 2-3% cynicism that exists, right? Which means that what sells typically, and this is the common phrase, right, is the negatives or the extreme emotions, not necessarily what is good, boring, but essential and important, the way you phrased it, because it's fundamentally not how society's conditioned us, right? It's not appealing enough because it's not what you get to find the high in. It's the thing that gives you calm, peace. But calm, peace don't sell, right? Talk to us about how do you look at that from a business POV perhaps, right? Just because anybody who's also, by the way, creating content, and I face this myself, right? Like I constantly juggle between, hey, if I want to have a deep business conversation, right? That may not be appealing to enough people. How do I marry the two if I also want distribution while I don't want to dilute the quality of my conversations? How do you look at that? Because you have a POV as a creator, you have a POV as a podcaster, you have a POV as a company builder, as an entrepreneur, and also as a person who's spreading a lot of impact. So I'd love to understand your worldview on this.
So I love that question because it it actually explains why we started the way we started at Yuvaa. So again, my background has been in long form. I have made TV shows at MTV. I have made TV films at MTV. My claim to fame actually before any of this stuff that I did at Yuvaa was that I have produced 4 of the first 10 web series ever made in India. Okay, before Netflix, Amazon, Hotstar, there was TVF, there was AIB, there was Y Films. The first web series ever made in India actually was Permanent Roommates by TVF. The second was Baked by Scoop Whoop. The third web series was ours. It was called Man's World. It was Y Films that I had produced. The fourth one was Bang Baja Barat, again something that I had produced. Fifth was Pictures by TVF. And that's among the first 10 web series, I was the one who produced 4 of them. So I was there at the start of the digital ecosystem and the long form digital ecosystem in this country. Those series today are at 50 to 60 million, per season of work. I've also made a film. I've done all kinds of work in the long form space. When Yuvaa started, because of the success that I had found in long form, whether it was in television, films or the web world, I truly believed that that is the way to go. I truly believed that I needed to create a platform where I can create long form conversations, whether fiction, whether non-fiction, to get young people excited. And I think in the time that I quit YRF, which was in 2017, and in the time that I started Yuvaa, which was in 2018, and there was about a 8, 9, 10 month gap that I had, a sabbatical that I had taken, Instagram blew up in India, right? YouTube was huge. YouTube was the first big social platform that came in our country. And then Instagram came and short format started becoming big all of a sudden. And it's not that Instagram was not there, it was a photo app till then.
Yeah.
And Instagram pivoted to being a little bit more of a video app during that time. And suddenly we were at a place where we were like, a lot of people have now suddenly started consuming these shorter form content pieces, and we had an idea of creating a media ecosystem focused on long form. And we were just like, is that even going to be possible right now? We had to really pivot very hard almost immediately. When I made I made Man Yaar in 2023, the first season. It was on my whiteboard in 2019. It took me 4 years to get ready to make that show, not because I didn't have the idea or I wasn't convinced about the feasibility of this idea, but at that point of time, I didn't have the distribution to make that idea successful. Because if I was going to spend time, energy, effort into something I was deeply passionate about on a YouTube channel, I knew that I'm not going to get something discovered directly on YouTube, because right now the platform for people to get to YouTube have become short format. Facebook was a platform that I was very active in, and suddenly Facebook changed their entire algorithm and ecosystem. All the media organizations, you remember, all the media organizations that had Facebook as their primary distribution medium just went up in the air. An organization called Witty Feed, which was one of India's top, it was before Scoopoo, it was really India's biggest youth media company. Even before TV, I would say. It's based out of Indore. Fascinating people. Went up in the air almost overnight because Facebook changed their algorithm. And then when Instagram came, and suddenly pivoted from photos to videos, again, there was a complete pivot, and every media company, worth its salt, had to really think about what is their strategy going to be. And we were a younger organization, we had a new organization. We had to, our 5-year visions, which was that we will create a lot of long form content, and then we will move into non-fiction, we will move into other kind of things. We had to actually absolutely reverse course and start out as a short format content creation company, build a distribution network first before we can start doing longer form deep work. Because how are we going to get the deep work discovered if people are not, if we don't have ways of telling people that go and check out this work? Because of YouTube, unless you're a creator and you're creating something which is based on you and your identity, which is what people come back for, or you're like a BuzzFeed or a Scoopoo, which had a website, which also was a distribution platform that would direct people to their YouTube channels. How do you get people in the new world to watch YouTube? And that's where, I think, and this is what's happened over the last 5 years with Yuvaa. It's what happened with the world. And to answer your question, we had to actually reverse course. So we had to go to get to a place where we can do deep conversations, to get to a place where we can have nuance, to get to a place where we can really put out work that we believe needs to be watched because of not just the content, but what I think the meaning of that content. We had to first build a distribution network that had enough in it and enough of a community that cares about those topics. So when they finally create long form, they're like, oh, we trust these people on the short form of this work. I believe that when they do something long form, we would like to go and watch it.
That is again very well articulated. The learning for me is that you have to earn the right to be able to get to a position where you can spread impactful content. Till then, you have to serve the customer in the best possible manner that you can, in the way they like. Which will.
But you see, when you say you have to earn the right, it's not true in all situations, right? And it's not true for all people. I don't think anyone's waiting to earn the right these days, right?
Okay.
I feel like we had to do it because we are trying to talk about credible things. When you're talking about credible things, you also need to be credible organization.
Sure.
Not that again it has stopped anyone from saying anything. In fact, I feel like one of the biggest, my biggest issues with the content and media ecosystem right now is that people say a lot of things on the internet without having any understanding of it, without having any domain expertise, without having spent the time, effort, education, or actually having an awareness about those things before putting out like really big POVs and not having anything to back it up. And people lap it up. Why? Because these are folks that they might know well for something else.
Yeah.
They might be like, oh, I love watching this person because he or she talks about sports all the time. So now suddenly when they're talking about an issue which is important in the world, I will listen to him because I've related to him on sports. But you cannot.
Yeah.
You cannot listen to somebody who you love for entertainment or sport or finance or VC talk about, mental health, or talk about gender, or talk about sexuality, just because you like them and find them relatable on these topics, because the rest of those things are really nuanced. You need to have people who have built their credibility. But again, unfortunately, Jivraj, everybody else who's built their credibility in this world is not looking at media as a place to deploy their work, because media is a very different ecosystem. So, again, I just wanted to point out that it's very specifically in the case of something like the company that we are doing, that we really needed to build our credibility on ground, and to that effect. And we put our efforts into going on a roadshow. We went, before we had our Instagram page, we went on a massive pan-India roadshow called the Yuvaa Roadshow of Kindness. We went to, the first roadshow that I did was in 2019, January, where I went to 75 campuses over a period of 4 months across the country. We went to about 25 to 27 cities, south, north, east, west, across the country. I was on the road for 4 months to create safe spaces, to listen to young people, to create non-judgmental spaces where they would feel comfortable expressing. And that insight is what I brought back and then really started working on Yuvaa. So it actually, before we did anything in Yuvaa that we could even earn money for or from, or kind of find partners and collaborators on kind of trying to scale those important issues that we're talking about, or the insights of the important issues, we actually need to hear young people on ground. So much of the first year of Yuvaa, before our Instagram page launched on January, I think 31 or something, I started going on the roadshow from about first week of January. We launched our page during the roadshow in campuses. So while we were going to campuses, we were having these really important conversations, or meaningful, I would say. And then at the end of it, I'd be like, so by the way, we've just launched the Instagram page and we'd love for you to join. So the first people who somehow today are still people that I end up just bumping into. I might go to somewhere, for a award show or a conference or something, and somebody might come up and say, you came to my college in 2019 and now today I am here, and I've seen your journey from the time that you were on ground building this. That credibility is very important to me for the kind of work we are doing at Yuvaa. Sure. It's not something that a lot of people care about. And I would say in the startup ecosystem, I again see the people who are most successful are people who are doing that on ground work. Yeah. Like even again, in your own example, Jivraj, I feel like the reason that you've been able to do a good job as an investor or as somebody who is now part of the ecosystem is because you spent so much of your time in actually learning from the conversations you're having on this podcast. You started the podcast first to hear the things and understand how this world works, and then you dove into this world as a investor or a VC yourself. And it's the same thing with Yuvaa, but I feel like a lot of, whether it's startups, whether it's media organizations, whether it's creators, not enough people put in the work. And that's where you might have temporary highs, but long term you're not just damaging your brand, you're damaging the information ecosystem around you.
Yeah, no, I think again, very, very well put. I think
I'm very passionate about these things, so I'm just,
I think that helps, right? I think it shows also. But influence may not necessarily equate to credibility, and I truly believe that as well. I do think the world could do with more people who are who care about their credibility before putting out their opinion, but I think they
just care about the work, man. It's not even the credibility, right? Just care about your work.
It should come from a safe space, and
I feel like most people, unfortunately, and this is, I don't want to generalize, but I really feel in the time that we live in right now, everybody is after the quick buck. Everybody is after the quick success. Before a startup is born, you are talking about valuation. I find it so strange. I'm like, put in the work, put in the time, care about the work you do, and care about the people you're doing this work for. Care about the thing that you're trying to fix. If I had to put it in startup terms, what Yuvaa has been trying to fix is loneliness. We were trying to fix loneliness in India. We were trying to fix mental health issues of young people, not through a diagnostic clinical way, but why are young people lonely? Because they're not feeling seen. Why are they feeling lonely? Because people judge them, they look down upon them. Their own parents feel like they're entitled. They are always saying that young people are constant. Everybody must be saying this to you also as a young person yourself, right? Why are you always on your phone? You keep hearing that all the time. अरे young people हमेशा अपने phone में रहते हैं, हमेशा घुसे रहते हैं. They are entitled. They don't care about anything around them. They're always focused on their own thing. After the first roadshow that I went to, my biggest epiphany was the reason that young people look down is because they're scared that when they look up, nobody is actually going to hear them out. Nobody is going to care about what they have to say. But in the phone, they find these niche communities that are their safe spaces where people, even if it is dank memes, I'm not even saying that these are like meaningful spaces. They could be dank meme spaces, but in those spaces, they're finding acceptance that they're not finding in the real world. That epiphany I would not have had I not spent the time in going and learning about the country. Today, if I'm able to do a Be a Man Yaar, it's because I've directly heard from so many young men in the country that they're feeling lonely. I've heard from, I mean, again, I know that you'll have a lot of questions in this thread, but since I'm just talking about this, I have heard things, Yuvraj, from young men in our country, like on the road shows, about how nobody has given a hug to them in their entire life. How nobody has said, I love you to them in their entire life. I have heard young men come up to me and said, one thing that still gives me goosebumps is like this one boy would come up to me and said, Sir, pata aapko, jab se main bachcha hu na, mujhe kisi ne, I don't think I've received touch. He's like, I don't think anybody has touched me since I was a baby. I mean, those are the kind of things that you're hearing from young people. And, you know, that's when you realize, oh, I need to find a way of solving this. How can I solve this specific kind of loneliness? And that's where Be a Man Yaar comes. When we heard from women that they're talking very deeply about, unfortunately, harassment that they face as a country, as a gender in this country, we then started figuring out what can we do and which brands and non-profits can we work with to kind of help them. So we tied up with L'Oreal last year to do this roadshow with Navya Nanda and L'Oreal, where we did we went to several colleges to have conversations about to have trainings on street harassment awareness, and we also spoke about growth of young women, how young women can break out of these patterns and then embrace their careers. And I mean, everything that we're doing has come from insight, that has come from genuine on-ground work, which I feel like whether it is a media company like ours, whether it is what the work you are doing as a VC, as a podcast host, and I feel like every startup ecosystem, every startup in this country needs to do, put in the work. Spend the time and care deeply about the work you do, not just to build credibility, because you owe it to the people you're doing it for, and you owe it to yourself. That's something I really deeply believe in.
No, awesome. I think so much of what you're mentioning, and I will keep saying this throughout the conversation, is so well articulated, because I think I was expressing to you before this, the way you extrapolate, the way you bring out second order thinking is extremely interesting. In fact, one of the things that's been running on my mind since we started is your knowledge of media seems extremely comprehensive, and you've had the benefit of starting early and compounding what you've done in different shapes and forms, right? You've seen different versions of media, you've seen different form factors, and you've also seen the India consumption evolve, right? If you had to lay down a market map for us, not even a market map, just a evolutionary theory of media in India, since maybe the time you started, I'm guessing 2007-8, right? To where we are today, 2024. So from large TV screens, in fact, large movie screens, to TVs inside of homes, to the screen in our phones, to social media and different form factors, and to now Reels and Netflix and OTT platforms. What can you tell us with your vantage point as to how media has evolved?
So I think it's a great question. I think I'll answer this question not from the evolution of media, but actually answer it to the evolution of characters in storytelling. Okay, because I think that'll make a better understanding of how media has evolved, right? So I'll try to answer your question not just by talking about the changing media, but actually by talking about the characters in film and storytelling over the years, because I think that'll give a better understanding of what I'm trying to say. Okay, so let's start with the 70s, because that's where television etc. happened, right? 70s and also how culture, and socioeconomics kind of has worked in the development of media. In the 70s, there was a huge character in films, played by the legendary Amitabh Bachchan. What was the name of the character?
Gabbar? Sholay?
Amitabh Bachchan का character क्या था? There was a name there was a name that he used to have. Almost in every films. You're too young. Now I feel like. But
I'm feeling bad.
I'm sure if you've seen any Amitabh Bachchan film, there was this one name. तुमने दीवार देखी है? कोई तो Amitabh Bachchan की. Okay, ठीक है.
So sorry. I'm feeling so bad.
It's okay. I mean, I should have known better. I'm talking to hardcore Gen Z. So in 70s, Amitabh Bachchan had a character name in most of his films, which was his character was defined as the angry young man, and the name was Vijay. Okay, Vijay was the name of the character, and Vijay was the guy who was really upset about society at large. There was corruption all around. There was people the rich were getting richer, the poor were getting poorer, and he was the common man who was angry, and he was anti-establishment, and he was pissed. This continued way into the 80s. He ended up, after the 70s, where he was the common man, he was a good man. In the 80s, Vijay became pretty much the bad guy. He started becoming, he's like, oh, I can't beat the system, so I'm going to join it. So things like Agnibath and everything started happening, where Vijay Dinanath Chauhan, from the good guy Vijay, he became the bad guy Vijay, and now he started becoming the establishment. He became a gangster. He became the guy who's just like, मैं कुछ नहीं कर सकता इसका, मैं खुद पैसा होड़ूंगा, because why? I'll hoard the money. I don't want to care about the rest of the society, right? But then what happened in 90s? The liberation happened, right? Dr. Manmohan Singh came, and there was a huge economic boom. India, there was a huge amount of money that came into the Indian ecosystem because of liberation, and suddenly there was not wealth, but there was money to go around. There were jobs where the angry young man was pissed that he didn't have enough roti, kapda or makan was the fight that he had to do. In the 90s, it wasn't roti, kapda or makan. It was more about, okay, I think I'll be able to do that. I think I'll be able to have my basic necessities taken care of. But what I need right now in life is possibly a partner who I can share this life with. Roti, kapda, makan तो है, but प्यार चाहिए यार मुझे. And that's where another kind of hero came. अब ये तो उन्हें पता होगा, शाहरुख खान आया. What was the name of Shahrukh Khan's character?
I'm not good with Bollywood.
Rahul. Okay,
yes.
There was Rahul, Raj. ऐसे दो character थे.
राज में बोले.
DDLJ कुछ होता है. कल होना हो तक लेकर. Shahrukh Khan was the guy, the lover boy, the person, and most of these setups were also set not just in either in privileged spaces in Bombay and Delhi or in international. They were in NRI places. Yeah. Why? Because this guy now had everything, so he could either go outside or he could enjoy a good life within the country. And what he was looking, as I said, was a companion to share. So that was Rahul and the progression of that. After that, when you found Roti, Kapda, Makan or Pyar in the 2000s, and I'm not going to ask you this, I'm going to just tell you this.
Yes.
In the 2000s, there was another character that came that reflected what post-liberalization and post-economical boom India looked like. And this is a character who's like, मेरे पास अभी प्यार भी है in terms of the fact अभी Tinder भी है. I kind of have all of these options of finding love, where earlier I had to really, literally run after a train and get a girl, who I have been in love with in a big way. But now I have access to that. So what am I really looking for? Actually, I'm trying to find myself. And that's where Ranbir Kapoor and Sid happened.
Yeah.
Wake Up Sid, Ye Jawani Hai Diwani, Rocket Singh. It was the same character, Sid, Kabir. It was this guy who was like, हाँ मुझे प्यार भी मिल सकता है, but मुझे actually क्या करना है, मुझे अपने आप को ढूंढना है. मैं उड़ना चाहता हूँ, गिरना चाहता हूँ, रुकना नहीं चाहता. That's really again how that evolution happened. And I'm going to tie it all back to media as well. But and after that, which is in the last 10 years or so, when you think of what is that defining character, in media, in the media ecosystem, in the film and storytelling ecosystem, after Ranbir Kapoor and Sid, you will notice that there is no one character that has stood out for a decade. Like what I'm talking about were decades. Vijay was a decade-long character. Rahul Raj was a decade-long character. Sid Kabir was a decade-long character. The last 10 years, we have not had any characters that have gone on for a decade. Why? Because everything has changed so quickly on a month-on-month basis, on a year-on-year basis. platforms have changed so quickly that you cannot have one thing that stands for all the things, all the aspirations of young India. So who are the characters? Bhuvan Bam is the character. Prajakta Kohli is the character. It's not just a man, by the way, this time. It's also the woman.
Yeah.
It's also people from other genders. It's also people from other sexualities. Anybody today can be the main character, can have and be the main character, not of only of their lives, but the lives and aspirations of a lot of young people in our country. Why? Because today, what young people are looking for is not the larger than life hero. They're looking for something that they relate with, someone who they relate with. And which is why today's biggest icons are not just Bollywood celebrities. They are your YouTubers, they are your Instagram creators, they are your podcasters, people who on an everyday basis are part of your life, who you feel are your friends. And this is very much in consistency with the evolution of those things, right? In your 70s and 80s, TV had come, but it was still theater was the big experience. For the biggest of experiences, you need to have the biggest of stories. So you had a Chole, you had a Diwar, you had Mere Paas Maa Hai, and तुम्हारे बाप के हाथ पे क्या लिखा है, मेरा बाप चोर है. You had all these big, massive, dramatic sequences. After that, when television came, everything had to become softer because it was in your own space. The people came to your home. And suddenly that softness was reflected by heroes like Rahul and Raj and Shah Rukh Khan, who was more about about a companion, because the companion is in your home. This is also where Saas Bahu really became a huge thing in television, because they were your extension of your home.
Yeah.
Before that, even when TV started, before Saas Bahu and before Ekta Kapoor, television also was wider. To keep in line with so you had Bunyad, you had these massively arced dramas about partition, about society, etc. at large, because not everyone even had access to the television, just so you know. I mean, again, because you're young, that's why I'm explaining to you. So you would have in a society or in a family like this one television set, and people would come around to watch it.
Yeah.
So there was literally a show called Nukkad, because Nukkad के सारे लोग आके एक ही जगह पे बैठकर देख रहे हैं. So you are watching it as a community experience versus, little later in the 90s where you're watching it among your family. And that's where Shah Rukh Khan becomes your household name, because he's someone who's loved by your mother, your sister, and you. And Ekta Kapoor is now being loved by the Saas Bahu ecosystem because she's also extending into the family. And then with the rise of YouTube, you suddenly had, YouTube was the first time that in our country and in most of the world, right, young people were able to have their own voice or find out who they were. For the first time, they were like, hey, I don't need to have privilege. I don't need, because all of these ecosystems before them, man, I have so much to say in this space, but okay, all these ecosystems before them were dependent on a little bit of privilege. To have that larger of life screen, be the larger of life person, you had to come to a city like Bombay, you have to stand in a huge line, you have to wait for your turn, and someday, maybe you become a star. In the 90s, again, TV, Shah Rukh Khan, the other thing that was happening in parallel was reality television. And reality television started booming when they said, you don't have to come to Bombay. I will come to your city, but you still have to stand in line because you have to enter a television. And it's an audition. Not everybody can be part of our households. We have to choose you, but we will come to your city. 2000s onwards, Sid, Kabir, YouTube, aspirations, suddenly everybody was like, you don't actually need to audition. It's all in your hand. You don't even need to come to anybody's city. You don't need to stand in a line. You can sit. If you have a great phone, if you have a good internet connection, you can be anywhere in the country and you can make your voice heard. But what is that voice? That was what Sid and Kabir were trying to find. And that is where the first few years of YouTube ecosystem was, where everybody had something to say. And now we are in an era where there's too much of everything. Now there is too much. Short format became a huge thing in the last 5 to 7 years. The attention spans dropped drastically. And because of that, no media at this point of time has a POV, because we don't, as a generation and as a world right now, we don't have a POV, because the POVs keep changing with the scrolling up and scrolling down and swiping left and swiping right. Every swipe that you do on your Instagram, on your TikTok or your YouTube shorts at this point of time, you are being sold this idea that at the end of this, the next swipe will give you something that is going to be a dopamine hit. That's when you win. You win in the next swipe. This is not it. तुम अगला देखोगे ना, अगले वाले में तुम्हें कुछ, so you keep trying to see मैं कब जीतने वाला हूँ, और तुम्हें हमेशा लगता है कि तुम अगले वाले भी जीतोगे, even if you have enjoyed this one, and it's always the next thing that is exciting, and that next thing being exciting has now permeated all of the culture. So it's also the next thing. It's not today, it's the next. Stree 1 will get 100 crores, Stree 2 will get 600 crores, right? It's the next thing. The franchise, everything is about the next thing. Even dating, people's Tinder and Bumble and all of them, while they've introduced choice, it's also created this idea that maybe this is not the right person for you. The next one. Why? Because he's available. And it's the same thing with pop culture. It's with the creator ecosystem. Today, there is a big creator. Tomorrow, if there is a younger creator who's appealing or who uses the codes or the language or the semantics of the generation better, they become the next thing. Yeah. So, right now, we are a very unfocused, unstructured media ecosystem because the tech and the evolution of the screens has made sure that we don't really have focus, and we don't have that one thing that we can stand for, or our value system that we see on screen. It's always about the next thing, and that's where from the largest to the smallest, from the widest to the sharpest, but also the most unstructured, most chaotic. That's how the ecosystem has evolved. And today, here we are. We are trying to create a long-form conversation on podcasts, which we also know are going to be actually mostly seen on Reels. You're going to cut out my 5-minute answer, and you're going to give a 30-second great part of this, possibly this part, put it on that Reels, where somebody will be like, yaar, ye baat sahi boli. Yeah. And then maybe some of them, maybe 1% of them go and say, यार इसका YouTube पूरा देखना चाहिए, ये पूरा आंसर देखना चाहिए. Otherwise, most people will just be happy with the 30-second hit, and they'll be like, what's the next thing?
Yeah. Wow, I could hear you all day, and I genuinely mean that, because there is so much to understand from you. The way I understand it is that one thing has drastically changed, which is democratization of control, right? So the big people don't control media anymore, because you can create, anybody can create. But one thing that has not changed and has remained a constant in media is distribution, right? That if you have the eyeballs, be it on a digital platform, which is, let's say, if you have followers, or because you have access to TV screens, or if you have access to the big screen, you will get views. A lot of startups don't understand distribution. What can you tell us about understanding distribution and how that has evolved over a period of time? Because you've seen the big screens, you've seen journalism, you've seen your own distribution with Man Yaar, with Yuvaa, you've seen offline events create a lot of impact, right? Talk to us about how important distribution is. How has that evolved? Just the art of reaching out to many people. So, and what is the capitalistic learning there?
I also want to say I have this really passionate outburst, and you just calm everything down with this beautifully focused question. And then I feel like, it's so meditative, and such a counter to my energy. I also have to say that I haven't slept much in the last 2 nights because I've just had a lot of jet lag. So this is also possibly that leftover energy. But to answer your question, I feel like there is a storytelling device. There's a storytelling truth that I very strongly believe in. Even when I was teaching, I used to say this very often. Even today, no matter whether it's a YouTube, whether it's an Instagram reel or a YouTube property or something that I'm doing at large, I very strongly believe in this. It is that the more specific it is, the more universal it will be. That is a way, I think, to understand all distribution.
But that feels a bit counterintuitive.
It's not. And that's the whole point.
Okay. Tell me more.
Let's take an example from my perspective of Man Yaar, right? What is so special in Man Yaar? It's actually two men talking, which is actually all podcasts, 99% of all podcasts that exist, right? Yeah. Two men talking, what's new in that? Right. It is the most cliched of ideas, of we are doing the same thing right now, right? But the difference was, these are two men talking about vulnerability. Two men talking about emotions. Two men talking about mental health. Now that is a specific in a larger ecosystem of men talking. Because when men typically talk about, productivity and success and finance and whatnot, here's possibly a first time you're seeing two men sitting and actually leaning into their feelings, which is a very deeply specific thought. I'll tell you, even in terms of branding, I feel like there was an idea that I kind of, when we were putting on the trailer of Be a Man Yaar, we put the whole trailer together. The trailer is at the first season. The trailer is what it was. I was very excited about the trailer. I really believed that this is something that will catch on. It was about to go on. And then I just felt like, I was like, yeah, something is missing. we know that this is about, a certain kind of masculinity. I know that we have done everything that we can in the emotion to show a range of what the show will be. But do we have a branding specific thing to tell the world what exactly this is? Sometimes you also need to spell it out. And literally, just 5 minutes before the trailer, I went to the editor and said, ki slate pe na ek line dal de. A chat show on positive masculinity. Why? Because I felt like if it's just a show about Be a Man Yaar, about masculinity, there's not something that's still, even with the trailer, even though it showed people that there are emotions over here, it could still be seen as a wider, more general thing. The moment I tag it and say, a chat show on positive masculinity, I feel like it will be a specific enough thing to pick up. And that is literally what happened, Jivraj. The moment that it went out, brands, when we made the show on our own money, after the trailer launched, we got 3 brands on it in the next 2 weeks. We recovered, and not just recovered, made profits on the season 1 after Man Company, Amazon Music and Maybelline came on board 2 weeks after the trailer launched.
Wow.
And I think this is what I have not in my career had sales where we have launched a product. They're not even integrated within the show. They're coming only on the outside, the branding of the show, because they believed in the product so much. And I feel like everybody picked this idea of positive masculinity. Press releases put it out, etc. And this is true for all distribution. It's true for your show right now, right? It is so specific. I told you even before, what I love about your show and your idea is, it's an Indian Silicon Valley. You have not just given a name, you've also given an aspiration. You've also given a mandate. You have also made it almost an ecosystem-worthy idea. That this is not just something that I'm doing as two people talking. I'm actually creating an ecosystem that is scalable. And it's the same with me at Be a Man Yaar, right? Be a Man Yaar is not only going to be a podcast. There is a Instagram page to it. We are doing lives right now. We're going to be doing roundtables at the end of the year. We're going to be creating a community of this. We are actually hoping at some point in time to create a Be a Man Yaar studios that will actually fund other properties which represent positive masculinity, whether it's a short film, whether it's a long form thing, etc., etc. But the idea is, how do we take this and make it as large as possible? But it has to start with the specific, and that's, I think, the key to all distribution.
Sure.
Find what it is. We are in a world right now where earlier the world was all one community, in some way, right? Or you had large communities that you belong to. Whether it was your economic background, whether it is your religion, whether it is your caste, whether it is your class, whether it's the city you're from, there was always a community that you very visibly belonged to.
Yeah.
Or very visibly people recognize from either seeing your appearance or whatever they'd see on top of your resume or your life cycle, right? Today that's not true.
Yeah.
Today the entire world is not one large community, but a community of communities. And not just a community of large communities, but a community of niche communities.
Yeah.
And if you want my time, my attention, because time today, time is money today, right?
Yeah,
literally
the scarcest resource.
Yeah, it is very much that. If you want my time, if you want my attention, if you want me to give 2 shits about what you are doing, you need to appeal to the nichest of your fan base. People, like I've always felt it, if there is one person you personally know, that for them it's not just going to be, again, this is my Rorschach test, as they call it, right? Whenever I make something, I always think in terms of one person, who is not just one person who I'm making this for, but I think, who's that one person for whom what I'm making will be their favorite thing in the world. It's not just about they will like it, they will find it great, or they will share it with somebody. I want to create something that for one person, whoever that person is, it's their favorite thing in the entire world. And if I'm able to do that, that one person actually represents a huge community of one people. And if I'm able to do that, because it's cool among a community, people will have FOMO. They'll be like, yaar, ye kya chal raha hai is community ke andar? How did K-dramas pop? How did K-pop pop? It all started with this. It was a niche community that started being like, I love this. And that became, everybody's like, aisa kya pasand aa raha hai? Aisa kya pasand aa raha hai? Aisa kya pasand aa raha hai? You know, and the same with, for that matter, the finance ecosystem today, the fact that everybody now wants to invest and everybody wants to talk about finances because there are some people who manage to make it cool enough as a niche community. Otherwise, पहला finance सारे CA करते थे. आप तो ना सोच रहे हो अंदर बैठ के, आप सिर्फ taxes सोच रहे हो.
Correct.
People से parents सिर्फ FD सोच रहे हैं. And then Ankur Wariku came and said, FDs मत करना. And सब लोग कहते हैं भाई ये क्या बोल रहा है? And now suddenly you have to start thinking beyond that, right?
Yeah. No, I completely agree, and so many of these thoughts resonate with me. Like I often say that I'm most grateful to my listeners because they are giving me the resource that is most valuable to them, that they are perhaps not even sometimes giving to their loved ones, right? Because everybody is busy. And in that busyness, if you have time to listen to a podcast, I am eternally grateful. And further, right, like, I mean, I also think that if you appeal to a niche audience, I think it just works like magic, but no, largely resonate, largely agree, and so much to learn.
And it's also the same with the startup ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
You have to always find that one person for whom you are fixing something that is a huge need gap in their life.
Absolutely.
And if you can find that one person, you will find a segment of people. And I'm telling you, the way that the world works and the way culture works, and I know a lot about culture, I may not know enough about the startup ecosystem, but culture works in a way that if something is Punjabi music, hip-hop music, Punjabi music, K-pop, even for that matter, YouTubers, Instagram, every single thing has become mass because it started as niche.
Absolutely.
You can't start as mass. You can't start by saying, I'm going to create something for everybody. That is never going to work. Even the biggest of films today are flopping because they are trying to create something for everybody. No, you need to create something for a specific kind of a person. In today's world, you cannot try to create something for everyone because there's nothing that truly is for everyone. But if you create something for a loyal audience that genuinely cares about you, that loyal audience's excitement, their joy, their love for what you're doing is going to be infectious and will attract other people into that loyal club.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and absolutely well articulated that startups also always like make something people love is Y Combinator's tagline purely because you want to build something that people cherish, and then when enough people cherish it, it percolates.
MLP, right? Most loved. Not just most, not minimal viable product, minimal lovable product.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this is very exciting. I want to do a small digression, right? Yeah. So we've discussed how media has evolved. We've discussed how distribution broadly gets worked. I want to understand that we're now going into the future where the value of manual creation is getting lost, right? So, and I wouldn't be worth my podcast business salt if I didn't ask you an AI question in media, right? So what I'm trying to get towards is the creation process itself will be almost invaluable, it feels like, at least in a couple of years, right? Because to create a post or an Instagram script is as good as writing a prompt today, right? Slowly, to create an image is as good as writing a prompt. Video and movies will perhaps be as good as prompts, right? Let's assume this is going to be true. Tell us where the skill lies. If the manual process of creation is all going to be democratized, knowledge work that goes behind script writing, ideas, editing, all of that is going to lose its charm. Where is the edge?
You're going to get me cancelled by asking me an AI question.
No, I'm really curious to understand because if I can write today as well as you can.
But you can't. And I'm not saying you can write as well as me.
AI can.
No, it can't. And that's again because AI can pretend to use my words, but AI cannot have my soul. And that's the difference. Because what I write, when I write it with a soul and a heart that comes from my lived experience. It comes from my traumas. It comes from my great joys and deep depressions. AI doesn't have that. AI can look at the language and the semantics and the vocabulary of that language and imitate that. Can it have the same experience? Can it be inside of me? Can it be in my heart? Can it be in my soul? No, it cannot be. And I'm telling you, anybody who genuinely feels that AI can replicate what a true artist does is not just ignorant, but I mean, again, I don't want to get cancelled, but stupid. I really strongly feel like, okay, I read this one quote, which I think just puts everything about AI in such a beautiful way, right? The quote said, I want my AI to do my laundry and my dishes better so that I can focus on my art. I don't want my AI to do my art so I can do my laundry and my dishes. You get what I mean? Yeah. That's what AI needs to be used for. Yeah. AI is a wonderful, wonderful system to make, as you said, manual processes simpler and more efficient so that we can do work that brings us joy. Why the fuck would we give AI the power to do the work that brings us true joy, which is art, which is poetry, which is literature? There is, see, this conversation, there is now AI that is able to do podcasts.
Yeah.
But the impromptu energy of this podcast, the passion with which I'm speaking right now, the calmness with you are responding, the thoughts that you are having while I say what I say, even if you find it rubbish, that's not something that
I love it, for the record.
Whatever it is, I'm just saying that that's not something an AI can
replicate,
emulate.
Yeah.
It cannot do that because it doesn't have again, it may have some part of your mind and my mind, but it doesn't have our souls.
Yeah.
It cannot fundamentally guess how will Jivraj respond to something when I say something as deeply passionate as I am right now.
Yeah.
That's not something that an AI is capable of. And I feel like we should really, as anybody in this space, now I know this is for founders and this is for startups, etc. You want to write a caption on Instagram and you feel like you can use AI, okay, go for it. You feel like you want to have a LinkedIn post that will do your the job of your company's achievements and just putting it out there, and it's a tool to do that, please do it. Yeah. Anytime you really want to connect with people deeply, you cannot go with AI.
Sure.
Because the alternate to AI, which we don't talk enough about, is HI. It is human intelligence. And I would say that let's genuinely, we should not just sharpen our AI to an extent that our human intelligence reduces.
Yeah.
AI is getting better, but we are getting dumber. That's not how it should be.
Yeah.
And more than human intelligence, man, human empathy, human emotion, that counts for a lot.
Absolutely.
It's the thing that keeps us alive. Stories, art, writing, music, these are the things that keep us alive, that make us who we are. Our fundamentals of who we are have come from the art we have consumed, the books we have read, the stories we've been told growing up, and those have shaped us as people. Yeah. AI can never understand that. So, I mean, this is, for me, I just find it like abhorrent that we really even think that AI can replace artists, writing or artistry, that it cannot. Where in films also, I would say, in television also, what we are doing with VFX as an example, use AI. Right. Do that better. But you cannot change what an actor brings to a table, because that is heart and that is soul, which AI does not have.
No, absolutely. I mean, again, I largely agree with everything that you're saying, and this is my version of my personal session of a Dead Poet Society version that I just heard. But let me maybe double click, right? Yes, my thought process is to understand that, let's say you built a media company. There are many media houses, correct, many journal houses, many people who put out news. There are a lot of script writers, a lot of editors, right? Where do you think the balance lies? Like, for me also, I want to understand, what is an efficient media company in the age of AI look like? If you had to draw out a map, right? Because what I'm guessing is in 2015, if you were building a content writing, publishing company, right, you would have to have 50 content writers. My guess is you need 5 now. So if you had to paint a picture for us with that context, assuming that AI does not replace you, it only makes a media company more efficient. What does that look like?
Okay. It's a great question again. and I'm going to try to I'll try to answer in two ways. Okay, first I'll answer the question you've asked, and then I'll give you my long form emotional rant on it. But to answer what the question that you've asked, right? Malcolm Gladwell has spoken about 10,000 hours it takes to master something, right?
Yes.
Anything, especially in the media space, especially in the entertainment, art ecosystem, right? Culture. There is a fundamental thing that makes art what it is. It's not its beauty. It's actually its imperfection. It's the thing that only human beings can do. Mona Lisa is famous not because it's the most beautiful painting, but there's something about that smile. There's something imperfect. There's something that an AI cannot do, an NFT cannot do. It is something that only a human being can bring, right? There's something that Nasiruddin Shah can do in his acting that no AI actor can do. There is the dialogues that he will... Amitabh Bachchan saying, or Shashi Kapoor saying, "Mere paas maa hai." Amitabh Bachchan saying, "Chahe us aadmi ka sign lekar aao," or Shah Rukh Khan saying, "Palat." The charm, the smile, whatever, right? You need in society that imperfection that only comes from human experience and human emotion and human empathy. And that imperfection, along with a mastery of the skill set, is what is required in every workplace, because that's how you're going to grow. The vision will always be set by human beings, right? The vision is not going to be set by AI. I hope it's not being set by AI, because that's a scary world again to live in. If you're allowing AI to set your vision, the vision will always be set by human beings. And that for that vision to be set, you need to have experience which is both lived, which is emotional, and that is both mastered, which is physical. And in your organization, you need to have those people. You cannot always find people who are going to have 10,000 hours of work done. So you will have to give chances to young people to build that capacity.
Sure.
So that at some point of time, they can build those hours so that they're going to be able to create that beautifully imperfect thing that ultimately connects with so many people in the world, because that's what everyone's life is. It is beautiful and it is imperfect, right? On the other hand, where it can help, and again I feel like the tasks that you feel does not require too much thinking, that do not require or that can be done with lesser thinking, that are lower hanging fruits. Now whatever it is, right now if you have to, abhi Canva bhi poster bana raha hai na, to abhi aapko designer poster banane ke liye, unless again you are creating a poster for something that is so deeply important to you, or deeply that you deeply love, ideally work with a human being. But if you're doing something that you feel needs to be done for the sake of branding or marketing, or something that is a mundane task, get it done.
Proofreading, copywriting,
all of that. See, again, everything that you feel is the work you need to do to keep your organization running, use AI for that. Anything that requires human connection requires human beings for that connection. Okay. A lot of these lines I'm saying for the first time, even when I'm saying them, I'm like, kafi achhi lines hai. I'm going to go back. I've never had this conversation. This is why I said I wanted to come to your podcast, because I know that there's going to be stuff that I'm going to be talking about that I don't typically talk about.
No, I'm so glad.
And the only other thing, actually, you know what? I think I've made my point. I think I made
No, I think I want to double click on one of the other aspects around AI that I think I'd love to hear your thoughts on, which is, so we've covered creation, we've covered media. Now the thing is interaction, right? A large part of the claim that you make is that there is representation on a screen, right? Now social interactions because of this have been dying down. Like the US fact is that we have become, in the last 12 years, since Facebook has gone public, a less social. The average interaction of an adult has gone down in the US. I don't know the India numbers for this. Now the leading question here is, we are also talking about a world where VR sets are going to become a reality, where I will be, if you were in the US, I could still have this conversation 2 years from today, feeling like you were right in front of me. Touch might become a reality. Mark Zuckerberg has gone on record to say holograms will become a reality. How do you envision that world? How does the problems, and I will get to that after this, like I will bring a closure to this loop, but since we are on the conversation of, advancing technologies, how do you think humans just like interacting with internet, new technology, how do they evolve? Like forget creation, distribution.
No, so I'm going to answer this in a funny way, and then again.
Yes.
When the pandemic happened and all of us pivoted to work from home, right? So even as our company, as a media company, first it was difficult because we have to create videos, we have to do edits and whatnot. And then, there was so many new devices that came up, from Zoom to, I forget the edit software that you can, I forget the name of the edit software. One of those softwares, right? A bunch of these softwares that came up that can actually allow even screen collaboration no matter where you're sitting, right? After a point in time, we realized that our costs have gone down because we are not having a physical office space and whatnot. We're not spending on electricity, we're not spending on, and our work is continuously the same. I wouldn't say it has scaled up, but it's not scaled down. It's actually been pretty consistent, And after some point, me and Kevin, who's now the CEO of the company, and he was the editor-in-chief at that point of time, we were just sitting and thinking, like, do we really need an office space? And then the reason we decided that, I think we do. Not because our work was getting, compromised, but because of a very other important thing which I feel you require in every office, in every ecosystem that needs to healthily grow into an organization, into a company. बकचोदी.
Yeah.
हमारा काम हो रहा था, हमारी बकचोदी नहीं हो रही थी.
Correct.
And I cannot overstate how important bakchodi is.
Yeah.
The best ideas come during those sutta breaks. Now, I don't smoke. I'm just giving you an example. The best idea comes from those chai breaks, those sutta breaks. When two people get away from office and I just like, चले यार थोड़ी बकचोदी करते हैं, और वहाँ से एक idea निकलता है, वो idea नहीं हमको आ रहा था. We were growing at the same pace at that point of time, but we had to have the foresight to be like, are we forming cultural bonds with each other? Yeah. Do we care about each other as people? Yeah. The people who are here, who I'm meeting almost every day on the screen and spending possibly more time on the screen that I've spent in the offline world. But do I know who they are as people? And that is fundamentally important for not just a media organization, but any company. How are you going to retain your employees if you don't have bonds with them? Yeah. How are you going to get them to care about the purpose of your company if they don't care about you and you don't care about them? Yeah. To fundamentally grow any company, you need to have people who deeply believe in the purpose of your work. Yeah. But for that, they need to deeply believe in you. And if you are always going to be an AI or a hologram or something, maybe there are people who join because the company is big enough, after a certain point of time, they might be able to join for that thing on their resume. They're not going to bleed for you. And when I say bleed for you, I'm not saying literally bleed for you, but they're not going to give, again, the heart and soul for you, for your work. There's this whole conversation about 80-hour work, right? Yeah. I find that completely stupid. Okay, I find it obnoxious that we are asking and putting policy, demanding from young people that why don't you give for our growth, for my company's growth, for the money that I'm going to have in my pocket, that may also go in your pocket, but you spend most of your youth working for me, for my organization. That's a deeply cynical way of looking at the world, and that's again as an obnoxious ask. Yeah. Whether it is Narayan Murthy asking that, whether it is new age entrepreneurs on LinkedIn saying that we need this, I think it's a ridiculous thing to ask of young people. On the other hand, Jivraj, I'm sure you have also seen it in your life and I've seen it in mine. If you give something to young people and your team to care about, they will put in the hours without you asking for it.
Absolutely.
They will not even care about 80 hours. They'll put 100 hours because they deeply care about what you're doing.
Absolutely.
On the day before we had our first conclave in Delhi, or 2 days before, the week before, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, रात को 2-3 बजे तक लोग ऑफिस में थे, जा ही नहीं थे घर. Everybody was in office saying, तुम चले जाओ, तुम्हारा तो काम भी नहीं है. अरे मुझे hang out करना तुम लोग. Because there's a vibe, there's an energy that you cannot replicate when people come together in teams to do wonderful work. It can only happen with the energy that human beings have. It cannot happen on Zoom calls. It cannot happen through remote working. It could to some extent, but not in the way. The magic cannot happen without human interaction.
Yeah.
My big bet, and as a entrepreneur, I'm making that bet for not just myself, but for our culture and for our media. Even if I'm not making that as a bet, I'm punting on it. It is that in a world which is furiously online, which is constantly, consistently, furiously online, we need more offline interaction.
Yeah.
I am betting on more offline community building at this point of time. In fact, that's the kind of work that I'm doing. For the next 3-4 years, I'm betting a lot on life. I'm betting a lot on creating offline communities for an online organization. We're a youth media, digital media organization. But I'm saying that if I want to truly create communities of loyal, engaged, caring communities of young people about any of the topics that I'm talking about, I need to meet them offline. We cannot do it on the internet. I have a broadcast channel that has brought people to my offline events. But if I'm only seeing them on the internet, I will never form those deep bonds with them that will make them watch everything I do, but or care about everything I do, because I don't actually know them. I only know their username. But the moment I have that brief interaction with them in an offline event, where they come up to me and saying, I love that thing. And I'm like, hey, you are on my broadcast channel. I thank you so much for engaging with me. That one little thing, that one little picture is something that this person is going to be like, you know what? I used to see this person on the internet, and offline this person is just as nice a human being. And I now care about this person's work even more.
Yeah.
Or for whatever, even if you're not meeting those people, I'm giving a specific example. Even if you're creating an offline event where people are coming and seeing your authenticity, your sincerity, your passion, your commitment, your love for the work you do, that is undeniable, yaar. That is not something that can be replicated. So I am punting extremely hard on the creation and the building and the necessity of offline spaces over the next few years. Because if we only continue punting on the online space, if we only keep ranting about AI, again, don't cancel me, but I am not as bullish about AI as the rest of the world from a lens of creating a better world. I feel a better world is going to be created alongside an AI with a lot more focus on offline interaction, offline community building. Because if we don't do that, the dangers of creating a world which is completely irrevocably online is not just bad mental health, it is the breakdown of society, which we're already seeing in the way that our world and our countries are deeply divided right now around political lines, around polarization, on every single thing. It's happening because we don't meet offline, we don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
We don't talk to each other. We are only consistently fighting with people's handles.
Yeah. No, I think that is, again, very, very articulate. I do think one of the big sayings is that Jeff Bezos said that commerce will never change. People will always want to buy stuff on the internet, and he said that people will always want convenience. So his mantra was get one thing right in your life. What I'm hearing from you is get human interaction will always be relevant.
Always.
And you get that one thing right, and you are betting so much on ensuring that it does, and I largely agree.
I don't even know if it will be relevant, but I feel like we need
to keep it relevant.
We need to keep it relevant as folks with privilege, as folks with responsibility and access and money and power.
Yeah.
We cannot, I genuinely cannot again overstate the importance of us in our, I was talking a little bit earlier, I'm going to go in that, I know that that's not a question you asked, but I want to talk about this, right? We spoke between our conversation, previous to our conversation on air, about this idea of everybody consuming 30-second reels, right? Like I also said that we have done this really long conversation. I hope some people watch it on your YouTube, but most people are going to consume it through 30-second reels on Instagram or YouTube Shorts or whatever it is, and then they're going to scroll to the next 30 seconds, whichever they find relevant, of some other conversation of some other person. Now, what is the danger of something like this? Now, I will explain the danger, and I'll explain the danger by using an example of, somebody I really deeply admire and love, okay, Ankur Warikoo, or for that matter, Naval Ravikant, right? Naval, Ankur are people who are experts in their domain. They have spent 20, 30 years of their careers creating a knowledge repository in their heads that they have now broken down whether on the internet, through podcasts, whether it is through YouTube videos, whether it is through books, whether it is through any kind of communication in a simplified way for other people to understand.
Yeah.
But they've spent 30 years gaining knowledge and then broken that knowledge into simplified ways for people to understand. Now people consume those simplified things. They buy those books in plenty. They watch those podcasts crazily, they see all those short form videos and they feel that they have as much knowledge as these experts on the internet, and that is the fundamental problem of a society. You are never going to have that kind of a knowledge, that kind of a understanding or comprehension of the things that you're reading or watching through 30-second things that have taken these experts who are talking about this 20-30 years of lived experience in their careers.
Yeah.
People are watching a Zakir Khan quote and saying, yaar, ye baat sahi kahi, main bhi agar ye kar lunga life ke andar, I think my life will get better. That's not how your life is going to get better. Zakir's life has gotten better because he's lived through that to reach that insight in their life. You can't take somebody else's insight and say, agar main isko apply karunga, meri zindagi better ho jayegi. Aisa nahi hota yaar.
Yeah.
We have reduced everything to Instagram, carousel posts, Instagram comments and YouTube shorts, and again, as I said, these books, self-help books that are giving us 2 pages of insight. Those things are fundamentals or basics of the knowledge that you may require to build upon on your own. But the work is building on it. Yeah. If we don't do that work, we will fail as a society, and that is what is happening with online interaction and offline interaction. Online again, the joke and the big thing, the cliche is that we were supposed to create a world that is far more connected to each other. How is it that we are a far more polarized and disconnected world than ever before?
Yeah.
It's because we have taken what was supposed to be a convenience for us and replicated all of human experience and all of human interaction with only this.
Yeah.
Today, a young person in Gen Z, we haven't spoken much about Gen Z, but just as an example, today, when I used to feel sad, Jivraj, at my time, I would have friends that I could call over or go to their house and sit across to them and just talk about my feelings, right? Not too many, but I still had that 1 or 2 people that I could do that, and there was everybody in their circles. I don't know if you did in your circle or not. Today, when a young person feels sad about it, they take a snap selfie of them looking sad, they put 2 emojis and they put it on the internet, right? I'm not generalizing. I'm not saying this is the only thing they do.
Yeah.
But, or they, send a meme to their best friend, a dank meme, they're saying, I am depressed, haha lol. Yeah. And they get a response saying, me too, haha lol.
Yeah.
That's the extent of interaction when you're going through a low phase. Very few people in today's young generation have the privilege of having friends who actually speak with them in the offline world, where they meet them and have these conversations. Why is the mental health issue among young people one of the greatest problems of today's lifetimes? The suicide rate among young people, the loneliness rate, the mental health, the depression, the anxieties, they've increased because we have stopped human interaction. Yeah. We have used these platforms and social media platforms and these mobile devices in exchange for human interaction versus in addition to. And unless I sit with you and I feel the pain that you're going through, until I see it on your face, until I see it emanating from inside of your heart, I will never truly have empathy for you.
Yeah.
If I'm only seeing that snap selfie, or if I'm only seeing that Instagram meme, or if I'm only seeing that YouTube short about sad life, I will say, हाँ ये तो सबके साथ होता है. But when I sit with you and I feel the depth of your pain, that's when I will have empathy for you. I will have empathy for myself, because that's what makes us human. The exchange of pain, the exchange of joy, the exchange of stories of what we have gone through. Yeah. And we're completely missing out on that. And again, for anybody who's watching this, if you happen to be a startup founder or a D2C person, etc., please recognize everything that you're working for has to be in addition to human interaction. It cannot be in replacement to. Yeah. Because we are creating a fractured, broken, inherently unworkable and inherently mentally inefficient, sad, depressed world that none of us would want to live in if it only had AI and convenience.
Yeah. Oh, I think that is Some very deep thoughts. I think to practice it is where the magic will lie. And I really hope that a lot of people listening are able to, grasp the
If they
gravitas.
listen.
If they listen.
Or if they watch it on 30-second reels and
Yes.
you've cut the right kind of reel.
No, we will. We will try to do our best there. But no, these are extremely powerful words,
I just want to
must
say,
say.
I love the line of questions you've asked me today because I feel so deeply about these things and somehow I've never had the opportunity to talk about these things.
Yeah.
But your questions have been so sharp and so thoughtful and so, I'm going to use the same word you use, articulate, that I just have felt like speaking deeply about them.
I'm so glad, and you're so expressive about it. I'm not ending, by the way. We're still concluding. We're still on a trail because I have so much to ask. By the way, in terms of time, आप बता देना मुझे whenever. So that's fine. But I want to get to one of the important things that you feel about, which is the Gen Z narrative.
Yeah.
And before I get there, actually, I want to understand that in the host of problems that exist in the world, which are plentiful in nature, I want to understand your mental model of deciding which are the most powerful ones to talk about. And in fact, if you could list down for me as well, because as I was going through my research also, right, I felt this sense of empathy towards and relatability towards some and then to not so much towards the others. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, if I'm the general audience, how does this man decide what is important enough for him to work upon?
Yeah.
So I want you to list down for us, and this will sound cynicistic in many ways, but the different things that are not spoken in the public narrative enough.
Yeah.
That is A. And B, if then you can list down how do you choose to prioritize to talk about some, address some. For instance, with the podcast Be a Man Yaar, you're trying to address masculinity. Maybe homophobia is a subject that is worthy of attention. Maybe mental well-being is a subject which is worthy of attention. And also, like, how do you figure out some of these? Like my thought process is, okay, if these are the 10 things that are bothersome in the world that don't get enough attention by mainstream media or enough successful, strong-headed people, I will be self-righteous to be working on 3 things and give it my all.
Yeah. Great question again. Again, I feel like all my answers always come from a lens of writing and storytelling. And like again, when I've done a lot of these talks and workshops on storytelling, and a lot of people sometimes ask me, what should I write about? Right? It's the same thing that you're asking me, what do you care about, right? And I always have the same answer for them. You have to write about something that if you don't write about it, nobody else can. And if you don't write about it, and if you don't write about it, you will literally die because those words did not bleed on your page. It really comes down to these 2 fundamental things. You have to work on things that you are uniquely qualified or you deeply, deeply care about yourself. If वो नहीं होता ना, and वही मुझे लगता है हमेशा ना, a lot of the times when I even see when you're talking about startups, you're talking about businesses, a lot of the times businesses also sometimes fail. Again, I won't say that people who get into the business of plumbing because they deeply care about plumbing, but there is some mastery to that as well, right?
Of course.
There is an ikigai of these things that I always kind of try to always map out, even in my office spaces. The ikigai always is, what do you of figuring out writing, art, the things that you are going to work on in particular, even conversation, why did I choose Be a Man Yaar or masculinity as a whole thing? The ikigai for me was very simple. What is something that I deeply care about? What is something that the world needs? And the third thing, which again becomes very important, is what is the thing that I have a skill set to be able to make as deep and wide as possible, right? If you care about something but don't have the skill set for it, you are never going to be able to either scale it or make it a business or be able to monetize it or be able to get it shareable. Like for me, the 3 S's always come down to scalable, sustainable, and shareable. These are the 3 things that I always kind of think about. When I say sustainable, I mean like, is it going to be able to get money for itself? Because you don't want to put something, no matter what subject you're picking, if you are not able to find a way of making I'm not saying money off of it, but if you're not able to find a way of funding it, you are never going to be able to scale it. Then you might as well write an Instagram caption and put it on your, on your feed, right?
Picture.
And if you're not scaling it, again, then you're not really an entrepreneur. You're an activist, and that's also okay. But I think scaling is really important, especially if you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And then of course sharing, and shareability is in today's world the most important thing. And shareability doesn't mean again 30-second reels. Shareability again for me, or virality for me, is something that starts conversation. I think we again get fundamentally this idea of virality wrong.
Yeah.
Virality is not about creating that, hacking the algorithm. Of course, some part of it is that. You need, again, this is where the skill set comes in, right? You need to understand what it is.
Yeah.
But essentially, you need to create something that people will be like, तुमने ये देखा क्या? अरे तुमने ये देखा क्या? And if you're not able to do that, if you're not able to create something that people want to talk to somebody about it in their personal life, or on their feed on the internet, people have so many stories. There is so much to share. Why are they choosing to share the thing that you have done? Yeah. That's a very big indictment that your work is good. If somebody takes in all the story, all the things in the world that they can be sharing, they choose to share your work. That is the reason they're sharing it, is not because it's viral. It's because it has in their mind sparked a conversation, or they want to spark a conversation. Either you have managed to have a conversation with them, or they want to use your piece of content to have a conversation with the entire world. If you're not starting conversations, it will never be shareable, it will never be viral.
Awesome. No, I think this is such a great framework for anybody who's also, thinking about creating content in general, right?
Yeah.
Individually, as a company, as a startup, and purposeful as well. So I think
I'll just answer this.
I have a double click question as well once you.
But I'll just talk about particularly as an example of Man Yaar, right? Because to use the same model and to use the ikigai of what I call it, right? I was for the longest, I've started a company called Yuvaa. For 5 years, I was only talking about youth and young people.
Yeah.
Okay, because that was something that I deeply was passionate about. I used to teach young people. I've worked all my lives in youth organizations. In HT, I was covering the youth beat, music, pop culture from a youth perspective. In MTV, which is a youth television channel, at Yash Raj, I was head of content development for Wi-Fi, which is again a youth wing. And I started my life journey as a teen reporter for a magazine called Young Times in Dubai, in the Middle East. Yeah. So my entire life has been young, and then Yuvaa. So it's a culmination of everything that I have done. It's been consistent from 14 when I started writing for Young Times till starting Yuvaa. It's a 20-year journey that I've taken to culminate into an organization that has built upon all my skill sets, all my capacities, all my passions, and then of course, what kind of a company do I make that is shareable, that is scalable, that is sustainable? All of that came with Yuvaa, right? When I pivoted to be a Man Yaar as something that I wanted to do, it came at a time where I believed that I was, as somebody who has started a company called Yuvaa and is getting now called for every talk, conference, etc. to talk about young people, I felt that I was not the right person after a point of time to take that platform because I was getting older. After 35, I don't want to be the person in forums saying you talk about young people. You should have a young people. You should have a young person. Why am I the person being there talking about young people? Then I'm a hypocrite. If my advocacy is that young people matter and their voices matter, but I am the person in every youth forum who's taking that platform and taking that spot, that's not fair of me. Yeah. So I knew that I had created, and that's also why, by the way, that I handed over, Yuvaa's CEOship to Kevin. I stepped aside. Not because I was tired of the work I'm doing, I still care and I'm working very actively with Yuvaa to scale the company. But I wanted to have a young face of it because I felt like, and I'd given that, by the way, at the very beginning of the company, I had laid out a mandate for myself that after 5 years, if I'm able to make the company successful enough for it to have credibility, for it to have a certain kind of revenue, and for it to have a distribution and scale in some way or the other, then I will hand over the CEOship to the right young person who will take it forward for at least the next 5 years. What is the next thing that I want to work on? And that again, now I had to really pick and choose. And I'm not just doing Be a Man Yaar from a lens of I want to start a podcast. I want to dedicate the next 10 to 15 years of my life on this now. this is an issue that has affected me as a person.
Yeah.
I have gone through clinical anxiety. At 30, I had to quit my job at Yash Raj Films. That's another entire story. But I had to quit my job at Yash Raj Films because I was going through clinical anxiety. I was diagnosed with it. I had to take a sabbatical for 8 months to take care of my mental health. I was in a terrible, terrible place. And I hadn't gotten anxious because I was going through a bad time in my life. I had high functioning anxiety. I was in a very successful place in my life, and yet I got anxious. And I had to take a lot of therapy. I had to take a lot of mental health, professional help to get to a place where I was able to take care of my mental health. And what I learned in therapy was a lot of my issues came from my understanding of my life story, and it came from a lens of masculinity. Because we have been told, given these narratives about what men should do, what women should do, what people of other genders should do, and we just follow them blindly. Yeah. And I had been following them till a point that I kind of broke and really needed to reinvent who I was as a human being, not just as a man. And that plus the roadshow where I got a lot of this insight that I spoke about earlier in the podcast made me realize that this is a topic that I not only deeply care for, I have the skill set, I have the empathy, I have the compassion, and I have the passion to work on. And I have the tools and the medium and the credibility now to be able to talk about it, not just from a lens of doing a podcast, but scaling this conversation over the next many years. I want to work on policy when it comes to masculinity in our country and positive masculinity in our country. I mean, I'm saying this right now, I really hope 10 years down the line, if there is better policies around men's mental health in our country, I hope to have done something about that as a person.
Yeah, no, I can put a pin to it, and when 10 years later we're chatting again, I'm sure there will be enough and more for our viewers to know in terms of what happened and what you contributed. But it is massively serving the society well in terms of what you do, and I love that framework. I think lots of learnings also from a structured lens of, okay, this is the structured approach to content. Also in terms of this is what you want to devote yourself into doing. Yeah. So I think both parallelly running really well. The other thing that is super exciting about what you do is appeal to the youth of the country. Yeah. And the youth of the country feels very misrepresented, misunderstood largely. Yeah. And there are people either trying to understand them to hire them, either trying to build products for them, either trying to sell to them, either trying to ensure that, you know, the content they do gets consumed by them. What can you tell to all of this audience, right, about the youth that we don't already understand? What is it that you can condense for us? Because I as a 25-year-old myself sometimes feel that there are enough of my own, friends who don't understand ourselves well enough, right? So there's a lot going on. I would love to hear your insights on it. And you sent me, I was reading through reports and stuff, and those insights are amazing. Yeah. But I would love for you to condense your knowledge and the work that you've done over the last 5-6 years with the youth, and in fact your lifetime, in the next 5-6 minutes.
So again, what I'll talk about the youth right now, and again, as you said, I think we've done a lot of, so one part of the work that people don't know about that Yuvaa does, because a lot of the work that is front facing is the content work. We also have a research team. We do a lot of data and research for a lot of big clients. We made with RPG India last year, we did this massive survey on Gen Z at the workplace. It's called the Happiness Code. It's available online. Please download it. It's a report across I think 16 cities. I think about 3,000-4,000 people. Really 6 months of hard work put into it, and fabulous as a report if you want to check it out. A lot of other public reports as well, but this is the key one, and we do a lot of private reports as well. But my insight again comes from meeting young people on ground, right? Because I do a lot of this. At this point of time, as I said earlier, I've been to I think about 200 campuses here. I've been to IITs, IIMs, AIMS, NITs, NIFTs, government institutions, private institutions, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, English language, Hindi language, all kinds of campuses around 40 cities of India, and just try to hear young people. 3 or 4 key things that I've understood about this generation. I'm going to try to quickly put them together. One, this is a generation that is, let me compare and contrast it with millennials, right? As millennials, we were rebels without a cause. Okay, my parents told me, तुम engineering करो. मैंने कहा मुझे नहीं करनी. And I'm like, क्यों? And I was like, पता नहीं, but नहीं करनी. Now, I did not know why I don't want to do engineering because I had no other options. I had no other choices. I had nothing. I mean, there was no Instagram and Facebook or could be बाद में आया था. मतलब मैं तो I'm that dated. You know, I graduated this year. I finished 20 years of graduating from school. Can't believe that. Right? But when my parents said that तुम्हें engineering करनी पड़ेगी, I was like, okay, because, you know, I just didn't have another option to give them, you know. But today when a young child is told, you do this, and they say no, there is a big reason for it. Because young people today from the age of 12, 13 have an understanding of the choices they have.
Right.
Their problem is, which choice do they pick? Which identity do they go for? Whereas we were finding our identities, they are trying to figure which one of them fits them best.
Yeah.
Where we were rebels without a cause, they are rebels with a cause. In fact, they're not just, I would say, not even rebels, they're empathetic rebels. Where they're not fighting their parents, they're negotiating with their parents today.
Yeah.
They're saying, listen, we respect what you have to say. At the same time, we understand what we want. So many colleges that I've gone to, like, you know, one of my favorite insights about young people has always been that where earlier, you know, people used to have side hustles during college. Today, now it seems that college has become the side hustle. You know, college side में कर रहे हैं, कुछ main काम life के अंदर कर रहे हैं, है ना? तो वही हो रहा है. Parents को बोल रहे हैं कि, you know, हाँ हम लोग college जाएंगे, आपका chosen stream भी कर लेंगे. But actually, my heart, I am going to build whatever I want on the side, and hopefully it will do something well. And whether it's an Instagram page, whether it's a company, whether it's a passion, whether it's dancing, whatever it is, right? I'll do it on the side, and hopefully invent something, whatever. I'll do it on the side, and hopefully it will become big enough for me to tell my parents, देखो अब मैं सब छोड़ सकता हूँ, मेरे पास ये हो गया. हमारे पास ऑप्शन नहीं था. हम कहते थे हम लोग पूरा करेंगे, फिर देखते हैं, फिर आगे कुछ करेंगे. That's one. So rebels with the cause, people finding their, people choosing their identities instead of fighting. The thing that complicates this a little bit is, easy for me to say they're negotiating, etc., etc. The thing that complicates is that हमारे ज़माने में ना हमको बहुत बोला जाता था, लोग क्या कहेंगे? You know, there's a joke and common thing, right? What will people see? यहाँ पर ना थोड़ा this generation के लिए funda has gotten complicated because it's not about what will people say, it's about what will parents say. Because this generation doesn't give a fuck about people and society, but it deeply cares about its own parents. बिकॉज जब हमको नहीं पता था ना कि हमारे पेरेंट्स, यार हमारा तो ऐसा होता था कि पेरेंट्स एक्सेप्ट करें ना करें तो क्या ही है, मतलब थप्पड़ और मार देते. इट वाज जस्ट वन ऑफ दोस थिंग्स, इट वाज जस्ट लाइफ दैट नोबडीज पेरेंट्स एक्सेप्ट देम. But now, again, because of the information that young people have, the knowledge and understanding they have of great lives that can be led, and the fact that they have the information, but their parents don't have that information, makes things very complicated for them. They're just like, why do our parents not understand us? Because we are educated and growing up on the internet, and we have a way of thinking. Young people today are progressive people living in conservative households.
Yeah.
At 15, where earlier parents used to say, like my parents would scold me and say, shut up, do what I say, because हमें ज़्यादा पता है. And I would say नहीं पता आपको, but उनको ज़्यादा पता था. मुझे नहीं पता था इतना. At 15, I was a dumb fuck. In today's society, a 15-year-old being told by his parents, हमें ज़्यादा पता है, is actually categorically false.
Yeah.
The 15-year-old possibly knows more than their parents.
Yeah.
Because their parents adapted to the internet at an age when they were 30, 32, 33.
Yeah.
And this kid is born on the internet, has grown up on the internet.
Yeah.
They have the understanding and awareness and information. They don't have the lived experience. So they don't have the emotional maturity that needs to come with this understanding of the world. And because of that, they feel extreme. That's where the mental health is challenged. That's where the loneliness sets in, right? Like, I have all of these choices. I know what I want to choose between them. Why are my parents not supporting it? हमारे ज़माने में love was romantic. I feel like in today's times, love is acceptance. For young people, what they truly, deeply want is someone to accept them. And that's where, again, this idea of communities comes in. Where do I find this acceptance? That acceptance I'm not getting from my parents. Everybody around me is also looking for that acceptance. So the thing that I always observe at every college is that there are four people sitting in a classroom as an example. Every four of them will talk about how lonely they feel, but they're not talking to each other. Why are they not talking to each other? Because सबको लग रहा है कि यार पहले मैं क्यों किसी की सुनूं, कोई मेरी क्यों नहीं सुन रहा. Until I am heard, I don't want to hear anybody else. Because everything is about themselves, because again, they've not been heard ever. Now, when we were not heard as millennials, we didn't care because that was the world.
Yeah.
Nobody
That
heard
was the
anybody.
norm.
Yeah, it was a norm. But here it is like, I'm seeing everybody's opinion on the internet. I'm seeing Greta Thunberg going and talking about, as a young person, I'm seeing Malala talking about it. I'm seeing Prajakta Kohli. I'm seeing everybody at every stage of youth putting their voices out there. But in my own home, I am not being loved, respected, heard, accepted. And that acceptance is what young people are looking for. And anything that can make them feel accepted, even momentarily, is the thing that they are going to dive towards. Now, whether that's a dating app, where they are looking for matches from a person who kind of makes them feel like, oh, they are valid and their profile is valid and their face is valid and, you know, their traits are valid, or that is Instagram, where they can put up a post and they get likes and validation, or that's LinkedIn today, where everybody is coming up with these bizarre designations, social media ninja, and chief party officer. I don't even know, man. Professionally unemployed, all kinds of bizarre shit that I'm seeing right now. CEO of my own life. What? So they are just looking for folks who can, validation is the easy reductive way of saying it. What they truly want is love and acceptance, and they're trying to find anything. Duolingo, is a way of finding acceptance. It's so bizarre for me to say that, but emotional, because when you're doing a streak, when you're learning something for such a long time, there is a validation that comes from an unknown algorithm at the other end saying, wow, you've done it.
Well done.
You've done it. Wow, keep it up. Now, you are doing it in a dank way and saying, oh, Duolingo is fun in its own way, right? But it's all about encouraging and saying, you are worth something. Snapchat streaks say that. This one relationship means something, which is why you have a streak. The likes, the shares, the validation, everything is geared towards giving them acceptance. But unless you understand the psychology underneath it, you will never be able to create products that, but again, the products that we are creating are addicting them to this. And what we need to kind of create are positive, thoughtful products that help them feel accepted without making them addicted to it. How do we kind of try to do that? Now, I know there are social media apps trying this, but I feel like it's a little too late for them. But I also feel at the same time, this is the first generation. All of us are the first generation of people who are living on the internet, right? Internet is 20, 25 years old. We don't have historical perspective.
Right.
I feel like जब TV, after 20 years of TV, our parents would started telling us कि आगे मत बैठो, चश्मे लग जाएंगे. उनको इससे समझ आता था कि उनको लग गए थे चश्मे. तो एज एन एग्जाम्पल हम अपने बच्चों को बोलेंगे कि तुम इतना मत इंटरनेट पे बैठो कि दिमाग खराब हो जाएगा. हो जाता है, हमको पता है, हमारे साथ so that underlying psychology of understanding that this is a generation looking for acceptance. This is a generation that's progressive in a conservative society. There's a lot of choice, but there's also the illusion of choice and the burden of choice. There is so much choice that it drives people nuts. The anxiety that comes with, even when you open a Swiggy and a Zomato, of choosing what is it that I want. You're spending so much time just deciding. That decision fatigue of opening Netflix and figuring मुझे देखना क्या है, इतना कुछ है. That is tiring. That tiredness and that fatigue is what is making the generation more upset, more depressed, more anxious, and that's reflecting in all other parts of their life. And then the final thing that I would say is what they're genuinely ultimately looking for are safe spaces. Whatever these communities that we can create for them where they feel safe. This idea of safe spaces is always looked at as a mental health term, but I also feel safety is something that is inherent to every human being's want and need. It is just, where can I authentically be myself? Where can I actually showcase some part of who I am as a person without having to compromise because it's a certain kind of platform, because it's a certain kind of person, etc., etc. And anybody who can make them feel like they matter and their voices matters and their stories matter is this thing that they're going to go deeply connect with. So one example I'll just give you is something we do called the open heart mic. Okay, so this is one of my favorite things we do at Yuvaa. Not many people know of it because it's an offline thing, as I said, but we do it quite a lot across the country. So we don't do talent open mics. We call it open heart mics. We tell people that why don't you just come, and if you've had a story in your life that you want to share with somebody, but you've never had a space that's safe enough for you to express yourself, come to our open heart mics. Come and open your heart. So it's not, you don't have to be a talented person, you don't have to be a poet, you don't have to be a storyteller, you just have to be a human being. तुम आओ, अपनी कहानी बताओ और हम सुनेंगे. और क्या क्या सुनने को मिलता है जयराज, if I start going into those stories.
Tell us one or two of the most interesting
stories. भाई वो तो अभी फिर again we'll go into the really deep. Okay, very quickly I will tell you very quickly one story which is of one of now my favorite people on this planet now. This is a person who in 2019 on one of our first open mics in Ahmedabad had come, went on the mic, first started reading poetry because they didn't know the concept of what you were doing. So they just started reading poetry thinking it's a talent open mic. After a point in the poetry, they just looked up and said, I hope you have got from this poetry, I am bisexual. That's what it's about, okay? And then all of us in that safe space cheered for him and said, woohoo! And then this kid looks at us and says, did you just cheer for me? We said, yeah, we cheered for you. And then they say, this is the first time in my life where I've said I'm bisexual and someone's cheered for me. I can't believe that. And we said, well, this is the safe space that we're here for. They're like, can I actually not read the rest of my poem and just tell you my story? And we said, that's what we're here for. And this kid talks about their story. They were 18 years old. They had been kicked out of their family because their parents thought that there's something wrong with them. And they had spoken in their school about their sexuality to a friend who then went and told the rest of the classroom. And then this person got bullied desperately. They were trying to find who they are, where they are on their own at this point in a hostel because their parents had kicked them out. Now this person, we heard the story, we had a lot of hugs and empathy and love for this person at the end of it. Now we record our open mics, okay, and we ask the people consent. Can we put this up on the internet, your story, if you're okay, because we feel these stories can make somebody else feel less lonely. You've expressed, can we maybe have somebody else who may not have had the opportunity to express but can hear you and feel like, oh, I'm less alone. We put the story out. And it was the first viral piece ever at Yuvaa. It was the first thing that we put out on Instagram that immediately went, viral. And after this piece went viral, this kid started receiving some incredible amount of love in his DMs, right? In the DMs, they had people reaching out saying, listen, if you've not had a community so far and nobody is there to love you, we are here. We are from a community called LGBTQ and we are in Ahmedabad, we are in Mumbai, we are in all different parts of the country. Why don't you come and join our ecosystem and you will feel loved? That's one thing that happened. The second thing that happened was the people who had bullied this kid who reached out saying, I saw your story. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize the effect that my bullying had on you. I was the kid that bullied you and I apologize for my behavior. Many other people reached out. One beautiful thing that happened was somebody reaching out saying, मुझे LGBT समझ नहीं आता, but मुझे तुम बहुत प्यारे लगते हो और तुम्हें कभी भी दोस्त की जरूरत होगी तो मुझे मैसेज करना. Those kind of things that happened. Now this kid had been kicked out of their home because their parents said, we cannot accept you because society will not accept you, right? लोग क्या कहेंगे? This kid did something beautiful. He took all the messages that he had got on. They took all the messages they had got on their DMs. They printed out all the messages and put it in a scrapbook. And then they went home and told their parents, you said society will not accept me. Here's the messages from society who has accepted me. When will you accept me? Imagine being able to tell this to your parents. You kicked me out saying, like, लोग क्या कहेंगे? वो तो अच्छा कह रहे हैं. आप मुझे कब अपनाओगे? When will you accept me? And the kid said that the mother, after hearing this, went into the kitchen, read every page of that scrapbook, read every comment, and then held their hand saying that, I am going to be there for you. The father, still being unfortunately the patriarch, took more time. But what happened after this is that the mother moved in with the kid. The kid now has a support system back at home because of this one thing that happened. This one beautiful open mic that opened their heart and that helped them find a community that changed their life, from that point onwards. So we're still very much in touch. Kid has come and told us the evolution of their lives since that first open mic and how many different things have changed since the open mic happened, since the video was put out, since their mother came back into their lives. And this is the power of opening your heart. This is the power of empathy. This is the power of storytelling. that we don't recognize. So yeah, I just wanted to share that one quick story, but that has
That is
had a deep
precious.
impact.
That is really precious. Thank
And
you
there's
so
hundreds
much.
more like this, by the way.
Wow. The gratification to be you must be incredible. And the organization, all of you at Yuvaa are doing the great work. So congratulations and thank you for doing what you do. And thank you for sharing this. I think this is largely moving. So I'm so glad we got a chance to cover it. This has been such a pleasure. It's been way more than I imagined it would be. And I imagined a lot of great stuff about this conversation. So thank you so much, Nikhil. As we conclude, I think the last parts of my conversation are supposed to be more attuned to the personality. Of course, a lot of it gets reflected in the conversation itself. But by and large, I mean, I'll curate some 3-4 quick questions to you that appeal to the things that you've done in the past, and maybe quick responses to them will help us get to just for the paucity of time as well in our schedules, and also a 2-hour plus podcast will not be justice to any of you, so I don't want to be a burden.
Go for it.
But one of the things that you've mentioned in the past is that or rather the pattern is that I think you figured out early what it meant to be successful, and then also how to use that success as an advantage, not as a greed. What I mean by that is, how do you figure out, or the simpler version is, how do you figure out your purpose in life and devote yourself to a purposefully successful life as opposed to just a greedy life, right? Because it feels like with Yuvaa, it's not just a capitalistic endeavor. Of course, you will make money, you will generate employment, you will serve your stakeholders in a profitable, wealthy manner. And there will be no discourse in that value chain. However, there will be positivity, purposeful impact associated to it. Talk to us about what impact means for you. How did you decode life impact? And very quickly, the idea is, what does this mean for you, and how can, I would just personally want to know this.
See, again,
I know it's difficult to
it's
condense
an
this.
existential question, but I think again, when you talk about impact, Jivraj, for me, it's been very simple. I am not trying to change the world. I am trying to find a way that if something that I do, if that helps even one person in whatever they do, one person, I am not looking at thousands of people. It's one person that I care about. If one person, looks at something that I've done, sees something that I've built, the company that I'm working on, and finds it valuable, finds it meaningful, and it becomes a thing that gives them joy in their life, that makes them feel less lonely, that makes them feel heard, seen, represented, that's all I care about. And the fact is that when you look at only that one impact or that one person that you're trying to impact, it eventually becomes a lot more people. So I never start by looking at scale. I always started looking at specific. I want to find a way of helping one person. That's it. As an example, a very quick example. When I started doing my road shows, today I go on in campuses and there are 500 people in auditoriums because there is a recognizable name and whatever company myself, right? The first few colleges that I went to in 2018, when we didn't even have an Instagram page, in 2019, I have been to campuses where I was told there'd be like an audience of 1,000 people or 500 people or 100 people. 3 people have turned up.
Oh, wow.
And Jivraj, I have spent 1.5 hours even with those 3 people sitting on those benches saying, it doesn't matter to me if there's not, I promise to spend 1.5 hours in this campus. If you are willing to listen, I am willing to chat. And I would sit with those people and chat with those people. By the way, one of the biggest impact stories that I've had through the work we have done in Yuvaa has happened in that first classroom that I went to where there were 3 people who turned up. One of those kids is today one of my deepest, greatest, I think, friends and folks that I look up to, love and admire because of that one relationship. So it has to be about something small. I don't think we should have megalomaniac ideas of what impact is. Look at...
How do you avoid the temptation of greed?
I don't know. Okay.
I'm sure you want to be successful.
Yeah.
I'm sure you want more money. I'm sure you want more recognition.
I have grappled with this idea of what is enough since a very long time. I feel we don't give importance to this idea of enough. Obviously, we can always want more, need more, ask for more. But what is it that makes your life comfortable? I think that is something we don't care or consider for. आपने एक घर खरीद लिया, that was your dream. Then you had some more money and you bought one more home, which is now your luxury. उसके बाद और कितने घर चाहिए आपको? और क्यों? Again, I just don't understand that idea only. मुझे वो समझ नहीं आता कि after a point of time, why you are just buying things to create a lifestyle, to buy more things, to create a lifestyle. You are not doing it because you need it. And all the time and effort and wastefulness that you're creating in all of this, you can be spending that time, energy, effort in doing something good in the world. Forget doing something good in the world, just doing good with your family. Not enough people are spending time with the people that they love in their lives in this race for wanting more things. I don't have, I can promise you, among the media, if you would imagine looking at me that there's a lot of money I have. I don't have that kind of money. I have still not been able to buy my own home in Mumbai. It's not that I can't afford a simple 2 BHK, I can. But I want to buy, if I get the opportunity, a 3.5 BHK because I want to have a child. I want to be able to live in a comfortable place. I can't afford that in a city like Bombay at this point of time. And I make no bones about it. You know, I see 23, 24-year-old influencers who are making enough money to be able to buy those homes. I don't look at them and go, sometimes I feel bad about it, but I don't look at them and go, "Arey, main nahi kar pa raha, ye log kar pa rahe hain." Because that's not...
Because you know what's enough.
Yeah, because I know what's enough. At this point of time, I have a comfortable home that I'm renting, which is the same amount of space. I can't buy that, but I can rent it comfortably. And I hope at one day I reach that place where I'm also able to buy it
comfortably.
But till then, I'm not going to spend all my time away from my wife, from my mom, from my, from the things that I love, the people that I love, in the pursuit of that money, ignoring the time that I have on earth with them. Because the pandemic, if it's not anything, man, you've only a certain amount of time with people. People can go like this. Anything can happen and you'll miss all of that time. Do you really want to spend all this time, pursuing things that, or also...
that truly bring you joy.
Or just genuinely staying with the people that you love, doing the things that make you happy, versus just creation of wealth, which how much is enough?
I love that. I usually call it the measure of life. I don't think very few people actually are able to articulate how they measure their life. And for people for whom valuations and benchmarks like wealth matter, they should chase it. But most people actually aren't chasing that, yet get fooled into the assumption that that is how they will derive the satisfaction of their life.
It's so funny. When I was younger, I used to look at history. I used to be a history buff. Okay, so I used to read history books and I'd be like, yaar, mujhe na history books mein aana hai. I used to always have that fascination that, when I go na, I should be in history books. People should remember me after I'm gone. After I started growing up, I realized that, and this is something that all of us realize after some point of time, no one cares about you, dude. No one gives a shit about you beyond a point of time, except for the people who love you. And after a point of time, for me, the most important thing in the world became, I just want to be remembered by the people I love. I don't care about the rest of the world.
I love that.
If the people I love talk about me and remember me and have fond memories of me and for the time they spend with me and they think of me as a kind, decent person versus somebody who created X amount of wealth in the world, but just a decent person who gave them love and who received love and left with joy in their heart, that I think is a great purpose in anybody's life. And that's why I feel like we should not measure people's happiness by how much they have, but how much they're able to give to the people that they love.
I love that. I truly resonate with it. I think a couple of people in my life have been, I've been very grateful to receive this advice from them. Like I have the pleasure of talking to capitalistically successful people who after a point start chasing some of these, ancillary things around health, relationships, service, impact. And so one of the things that I've taken back is precisely that. So thank you so much for mentioning. I was thinking about this one thing that I'd love to know from you. In my experience of running a podcast, the best conversations, fortunate or unfortunately, actually also happen beyond the camera.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about your show, Man Yaar, that we don't already get to see? Perhaps what are the off-screen things that have been counterintuitive to you or learnings?
Yeah, the funniest or I think the greatest learning for me was when we created this show, I genuinely thought it was a show that we're creating, as I said, for that one young kid who probably as a young person does not find a safe space in their life, a young boy who does not know where to find that safe space and looks at this and says, hey, maybe I can create this safe space among my friends. तो वो यंग लड़कों के लिए जो मैं अपने कॉलेज स्टूडेंट्स को मिला था टूर पे, उनके लिए बनाया था मैंने ये शो कि होपफुली दे फील लेस अलोन. नाउ द थिंग दैट आई रियलाइज्ड आफ्टर आई स्टार्टेड द शो season 1 onwards is that it wasn't just for them who was doing it. Every guest who came on the show
Loved it.
not just loved it, in between the show, when we changed the camera, would look at me and say, my God, I needed this conversation.
Yeah.
I can't believe I spoke about this. I can't believe that I'm talking about this. Hey, was I okay? Do you think I overshared? Hey, I think like I said something too much, and then later sending me messages and saying, that was cathartic. Vicky on camera has finished saying that, in the first episode, he's like, I don't even think I've had this conversation with my brother,
Yeah.
that I've had over here today.
Yeah.
Bhuvan, for the first time in his life, to speak about the struggle of alcoholism that he's seen in his father.
Yeah.
And he said in the show, I said, were you able to talk about all this with your friends?
Yeah.
Friends who's been his best friend since 15 years. He's like, wo pehli baar janenge ye dekhkar. He's not told anybody. But he was able to, I was hopefully, thankfully able to create a space where they were able to express this. And for me, that is such a matter of pride, and I feel like that is a purpose that I did not even know that I was working towards. That in trying to create a space for some young person somewhere, we have been able to create a space for the guests on the show, and for that matter, even me, man.
Yeah.
I end up so many times speaking from my heart about things that I have not spoken about because of the guests sometimes. When Imran spoke about how he had depressive symptoms, he was anxious, he had suicidal tendencies.
Yeah.
I felt at that point of time, because of the love and respect and the courage with which he spoke, I felt like even I needed to put my story out. I was able to talk about my anxiety on camera because of him. Because he created a space that I had created, and he created it back for me. So I was able to speak as well. So I think that's what I've realized about, Be a Man in particular, that when you're trying to create something which is empathetic, vulnerable for others, it ends up helping not just the audience, but also you and also the guest. And it's something that, like, dude, Karan Johar, मुझे अभी भी मैसेज करते हैं. मुझे पिछले महीने उनका एक मैसेज आया है, a forward that he received from someone about the show saying that, Nikhil, till today I am getting messages and I just want to say that your conversations have mattered that much. And for me, just to kind of have that, I ended up meeting Nasir sir recently, and he opened his arm to hug me, and I'm like, Nasiruddin Shah is trying to hug me? Tabbu Jivraj told me that Javed Saab had messaged her to say, watch this interview, I liked being on it. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And that for me, to have these mega stars, these proponents of the art, finding something meaningful in what we created, that's something I could not have expected.
That is so amazing. That is so gratifying. I mean, I can only imagine. I mean, in little shapes and forms, I get to witness it sometimes, and it's so magical that I'm so glad that you shared. And I can only imagine. The show is marvelous. I think not enough praise would be enough that I could at least express. Thank you so much, Nikhil. As I said, I think it's just so much of the marvelous work that you've done that I've been able to learn from today, and hopefully a lot of people will. One of the core objectives is also to understand your empathy as a business leader. And I think that is also much of what is a conversation amongst business leaders that is missing. If we can end at your learnings from being at diverse organizations and of building Yuvaa and of observing other leaders around you, I would love to understand, how do you bring masculinity and especially empathy into the world of business, irrespective of what kind of enterprise you may be leading. You may not be doing the work Yuvaa is, which is a different kind of work, and to respect on all kinds of works. But whatever you may be doing, the world could just do with more empathy. I think it serves the capitalistic purpose if we were. So if you could share your leadership learnings as we end, I think that would be a great note to conclude what has been a phenomenal conversation.
Thanks for saying that, Jivraj. I think let me start by saying that I fail a lot. Okay. And so we have commandments, we have these 10 commandments of Yuvaa. And one of them is that it's okay to fail, but fail better, each time. And when you speak about diversity, the difference in the way that I look at it is, I look at it as representation, right? It's not diversity for me. When I hire people from every background, from every part of the country, from every sexuality, every gender, the amount of insight, the amount of thought, the amount of magic that comes out of actually having what makes India India in some way in your office is undeniable. When you have that, and again, I feel like unfortunately people look at diversity as this policy, tokenistic policy that you need to do. Oh, we need to fill our office with XYZ, etc.
Forced.
Yeah, forced thing. It's, instead of that, lean into it. Realize that this is the country that you're reaching out to. If you don't have, if 50% of your organization is not women, you're just missing out on reaching out to 50% of an audience base that today, and again speaking in capitalist terms, has purchasing power. Unlike earlier when they probably did not. But even earlier, they may not have had the purchasing power, but they had influence on the purchasing power. And every single time you have alienated women, your product or whatever you're trying to do has never been able to reach that big. On the other hand, some of the biggest success stories, whether it is washing powder Nirma, whether it is Amul, all those things were actually, a lot of the times, even when you see advertising, and even though right now those advertisings are problematic in some way, that you're only showing women in the kitchen, but the fact is that you were always showing women because you recognize that women are the ones watching and influencing the husbands. So anything that you're doing, if you do not have those many different perspectives, diversity in perspectives and not diversity as a token policy initiative, I think is something that you really need to recognize can help and scale your business in a way nothing else can. Representation matters. The only other thing that I will say, that within an organization, what is empathetic leadership? I feel like we are a structurally hierarchical organization, but not a respect-based hierarchy. Let me explain that, right? I feel like you can have in any organization a hierarchy of designation, but you cannot have a hierarchy of respect. You cannot be respecting people only because they have certain more experience than you or they have worked more than you. You have to respect everybody in your organization. That's the first rule of an empathetic organization. Why are you treating your youngest employee differently than you're treating your oldest employee? Just because they are young and have less work experience does not make them any less human than your oldest employee. And I think that's a very uncool thing to do. And that's where a lot of people are losing out of on Gen Zs, and the Gen Zs are not sticking at workplaces. Because unfortunately we have been in a system where we have been shown respect only according to what we are able to add to the organization, and not just by the simple act of being an employee of that organization. Respect should be to everyone. And I'm saying, when I say everyone, I mean even the office boys or the support staff in an organization should get the same amount of respect and the same amount of the same amount of respect that you get, that you give to anybody else. Like I always used to find in the previous organizations this one really random thing, that when you're taking a photo of people, the office boys are not part of that photo. You would just be like, the office boy would be either taking the photo or be somewhere sitting on the side, and I always find that absolutely absurd. I'm like, aren't they part of your office? Because they're a lower scale of salary, maybe they're from a lower income background, I don't get that concept, and I feel like if you truly want to be an organization that is of India and for India, show love and respect to India.
Yeah.
And to show it to every Indian who is part of your organization, no matter the age, no matter the background, no matter the community, caste, religion of that person, that I feel is truly empathetic leadership.
Representation and respect. Yes. Those are the two things I will take
Absolutely.
back. Lovely. I think this has been insanely amazing. I think a lot of learnings around media, evolution of media, around the youth, around doing purposeful work, and around leadership. Thank you so much for being on the show, Nikhil. I truly enjoyed every minute of this conversation. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to find it amazingly useful.
I just want to say, Yuvraj, I don't think that I have spoken this passionately in a very long time. I feel like your questions were so thoughtful, and again, you exactly know what you want for your podcast, and that's also the reason it's so successful, because you know the areas. And what I loved again of what you were doing was, because I end up talking from a place of passion, I loved how you were turning every one of those insights into something that will be helpful for your community and your audience. So you were translating my passion into, hey, here's what you've said, here's what it comes down to for anybody listening at this point of time. And that's what, I mean, you clearly are at your age itself already somebody who has expertise in the work that you're doing. And I just, that's why I told you, I was so happy that, you called me, because I've seen the work you do, I've respected the work you do, and it's an opportunity for me also to talk about certain aspects of my life and career that I don't get a chance to actually talk about. These belief systems, these value systems through which I've worked on as a leader for the last, when I say leader, I don't mean leader, but just somebody who has worked on in a career of 16 years right now in the media and entertainment industry with some success. I feel like it was so important for me to be able to get this POV out there as
Absolutely.
well. So thank you for taking the time, making the space, and
pleasure.
Literally taking the time, because I know I spoke a lot.
No, it's been such a pleasure. If it were up to me, I would do this longer, and I truly mean that. And I really hope to hear you on more podcasts and your learnings, because those are immaculate. And more than anything else, and I mean this, and I don't think I've ever said it on the podcast, that we just need more lifestyles like yours, which prioritize their own personal spaces and do successful, impactful work, right? So I really wish there were more people like you talking about the things that you do. But on that note, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show again, Nikhil.
I really appreciate you saying that. I just want to say that the only place that I have been left behind in all of this is my health. That's something that I have not taken seriously for a very long time in my love for purpose and my love and the passion for wanting to do the things that I do. And I'm realizing it only too late. So I wish I had learned that earlier. But I'm so glad that, again, your generation is something that also doesn't compromise on that. So there's much to learn from your generation as well. But again, thank you so much for having me. And I'm so grateful we could spend so much time together.
I'm so glad. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello. If you made it this far, you've probably watched the entire episode. And if you've done that, I'm really grateful. I and my team try to put in a lot of effort to ensure that we can bring the best quality content to you. So if you liked the episode, if you watched it thus far, my request to you is to share it with people, to subscribe to the channel, and to ensure that we can keep growing. We are everything and anything only because of you, our listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll keep bringing to you amazing content. Cheers.